Hi and welcome to this lesson which is going to go through some final advice for junior cycle maths for both higher level and ordinary level. More information about this can be found on our exam techniques booklet, which is to be found on TheMathsTutor.ie /booklet. And in there you'll find lots of really good advice about junior cycle maths and about getting prepared for the exam and what to do in the exam. So the first thing that we need to think about is before we go into the exam. So before you even go in to sit that maths paper, what do you need to have ready? So we've got a few things here on our pre-exam checklist. What can you have ready? And you can start getting this ready soon. So have all this well in advance and prepared and ready for the day. So the first thing you're going to need is your mathematical set. So make sure you're going in with your math set, and it's a complete math set. So it has a ruler, set squares, protractor, compass, HB pencil, an eraser, and a pencil sharpener. That should allow you to do any construction that comes up and allow you to draw any graphs or diagrams that you might need in any other question. So make sure that you have your full math set and that it's all the equipment is in good working order so that none of the degrees have faded on the protractor and your compass is nice and tight, the screw on it, so that they're not separating the arms or anything like that, just in case we need to use them for a construction. What else we're going to need then are pens and pencils. So it's recommended that you answer in blue or black ink only. So that's going to be on the instructions on the inside of the page. So this means that we should be using blue or black ink, and these should be regular biros, so regular pens. Don't use the gel pens or the inky pens. That can make it hard to read your answers, and don't use any other colour. So we should only be using black or blue. You can, of course, have your pencil for your graphs, your diagrams, and your constructions, and make sure that's a HB pencil. So not anything that's too light that won't be seen clearly. So make sure you have your HB pencil. A highlighter pen can be very helpful when you're in the exam as well. Often when we're reading through a question, there can be a lot of information, and a highlighter can help you to pick out the relevant parts of the question that are going to be important, whether that's units or figures or just the question in itself. What are they actually asking you to do in this part of this question? And of course, really importantly, we have to make sure that we have our calculator. So your calculator must be a scientific calculator, and it should be the one that you are used to using. So have your usual calculator with you and make sure that it is valid for exams. If you've been using it in class, it's probably valid for exams, but you can just check that out. There are some that you're not allowed to use. Make sure that your calculator is working. So make sure that the battery is okay in it and the screen display is okay in it so that you can see all of the answers that come up. Know how to reset your calculator and how to change the mode on your calculator. So you might want to go into graphing mode to put in a table to get a list of points to draw a graph, and then you need to be able to go back to your regular calculator mode. So make sure you know how to switch between those. Also make sure your calculator is in degree mode, so a little D will show up. If it's not showing there, you might need to reset your calculator or change the mode. So make sure you know how to do that on your calculator so you are familiar with it. Good advice is to bring a spare calculator with you if you can, and make sure that that spare calculator is the same type of calculator that you're used to using. So again, we don't want to be throwing up any nasty surprises on the day where the calculator displays things differently or inputs things differently. So we want to have one that we're happy with and we know how to use. So that's the stuff that we need to get ready in advance. And then we're going to talk about, we're going in to sit the maths paper for junior cycle maths. In the first 5 minutes, read through the paper. So take the first 5 minutes to read through the paper from beginning to end and jot down notes as you're doing this. This can help you later when you come back to answer the question. Something might have come through straight away. So it might be, oh, I know the mode is the one that's there the most. So I might have jotted that down just in the margin beside the question to help me to answer the question when I come back to it. So make sure that we're just reading through the whole thing from the beginning to end. The timings for the junior cycle paper are quite different to how they look on the Leaving Cert paper, in that it's going to actually be written on the exam paper how much time is recommended to spend on each question. So you've probably seen this now in your practice questions, and you'll see that it says at the top recommended time to spend on this 5 minutes, or recommended 10 minutes, or recommended 15 minutes. Now, that includes taking your 5 minutes at the start to read over the paper, and then you're going to use your timings that are written on each question to keep an eye on that timing and don't go over that timing for each of those questions. That allows you time at the end to read back over all your working, so you will have more time there to check your answers, make sure you've included your units, make sure you've rounded correctly and so on, and check through the information that you're going to submit. And your past papers and your sample papers can be used to practice your timing. So when you're doing your revision in the run-up to the Junior Cycle Maths, make sure that you're checking that you are sticking to the allocated amount of time so that you're used to checking how long you should spend on a question and spending no more time on it than that. So the key message is really to manage your time based on the suggested timings written in for each question on the paper. Part of that time management is then not getting rushed. So don't rush through any question, and also don't get bogged down in any question. If you're keeping an eye on that timing, you should be working steadily through each of these questions. You will have time at the end to go back over, and you will have time at the beginning to read through. If you find that you're stuck in a question, make sure that you write something down. So never ever leave a blank answer or a part of a question blank, because with maths you are going to get attempt marks. So marks that are for work that is in the right direction. So even if you didn't get the question fully correct all the way to the end, you're able to pick up attempt marks on the questions for writing down information. If you leave a blank, they can only give you a 0, so they can't give you any other marks. So make sure you've attempted every part of every question. Never ever leave early. So remember, you have an allocated amount of time for this paper. Stay in there for that whole time. If you have that time left at the end, so if you find you've got all your questions done and you have a little bit of time left over, go back over your answers. So go back through your questions, double check all those things like, have you got the right units in? So if it said area, are your units definitely squared? Does it say round to 2 decimal places? So just make sure you're reading your questions and your answers really, really carefully. Only have a brief post-mortem afterwards. Don't be getting bogged down in, oh, I should have said this or I should have said that. Once you've done your best on that paper and you've followed your time management and you've attempted everything, you should move on from the paper. So what order should you answer the questions in? Because you're going to be answering all the questions on the junior cycle paper, it doesn't matter what order you start in. So you might like to start with your favourite question. So maybe you think trigonometry is the nicest section and you're going to go through the paper and you've been reading through it from start to finish and you notice that one of the questions is on trigonometry, so you might start there. Or you might say statistics is your favourite and you read through all the questions and notice there's a question on statistics, so you might start there. Or you can just start at question 1 and work your way through from beginning to end, but make sure you're keeping an eye on your timings. So just make sure you don't go over how much time is allocated for each question so that you don't run out of time. Once you've read through your 5 minutes, make sure you get started. So don't spend any more time reading through. Make sure you start in whichever method you want to do, whether you want to go from your favourite onwards or whether you want to start at the beginning. When you're answering your questions, make sure you show all your workings within the answer. There's no such thing as rough work for maths. We don't have separate rough work. It's all part of the answer, and you can pick up these attempt marks for everything you've written down. So make sure you're putting all of your workings down in the answer. If you make an error, you don't use Tipp-Ex. So don't cross anything out with Tipp-Ex. Just draw a line through it with your pen and then redo the question beside it. If you've no space to redo it, remember there are extra pages at the back of the booklet. Just make sure that you put a number on those carefully so they know what part of the question you're answering back there. If you're putting information into the calculator, make sure you write that down so they can see where that answer is coming from. Sometimes it helps to draw a sketch or to draw a diagram, and they can be drawn in pencil, Sometimes you're going to be asked to give reasons. So you might be asked which is better value. So it could be a question on which of these is better value, and you make sure you answer that question. So say A or B, and then give your reason. And if you're asked for a reason, make sure that you're describing it in plain English. So we're not getting big wordy convoluted answers. We're saying it in plain English, or we can use mathematical language to answer it. And that might be something like geometry, where you're trying to explain why angles are the same, and you'll be using your geometry descriptions to answer it. And again, never ever leave a blank answer. So make sure that you're attempting every single part of that paper. Hopefully you're familiar with these formula and tables booklet. They will be provided for you in the exam. So you're not allowed to bring your own in case you have writing on them. You will be provided with a set in the exam, and you return them at the end of the exam. Make sure you ask for it at the start. So just in case the person supervising doesn't give them out straight away, it's best to ask for it straight away when you go into the exam, rather than waiting till you need it, just so you don't have to waste any time waiting to get the supervisor's attention to ask for the booklet. Get familiar with this. So in the run-up to the junior cycle, make sure you're looking up any formula that you use in this formula and tables booklet. So you might be used to looking them up in your textbook. Make sure that from now you're looking them up in the tables booklet, so you know what formula are in there and you know where to find them on the day. And lastly, we're going to look at the SEC instructions on the exam paper. So this is taken from the sample paper, and it says there are 14 questions on this examination paper. Answer all questions. The number of questions can vary. So there may be 14, there may be 15. It depends on the year. Questions do not necessarily carry equal marks. To help you manage your time during this examination, a maximum time for each question is suggested. If you remain within these times, you should have about 10 minutes left to review your work. So that's what we're saying there. It's very important to keep an eye on those timings, and those timings have time built in to read through the paper at the beginning and to answer or to recheck your answers afterwards. Write your answers in blue or black pen, so use pencils in graphs and diagrams only. So make sure you have plenty of pens with you to answer your questions. The examination booklet will be scanned and your work will be presented to an examiner on screen. Anything you write outside the answer areas may not be seen by the examiner. So just be careful that you're answering in the located area for that answer. Write your answers into this booklet. There is a space for extra work at the back of the booklet, and label any extra work clearly with the question number and part. So if you do need to use the extra paper, make sure you've labelled it. The superintendent will give you a copy of the formula and tables booklet. You must return it at the end of the examination, and you are not allowed to bring your own copy into the examination. You may lose marks if your solutions do not include supporting work. So make sure you show all the steps that you've done. You're showing where everything is coming from and showing all your workings. You may lose marks if you do not include the appropriate units of measurement where relevant. So again, make sure that you have put in your units. For example, if it's volume, your units will be cubed. And you may lose marks if you do not give your answers in the simplest form where relevant. So something like calculating a probability, I might work out a fraction and I should simplify those fractions. And the last thing on this instructions page, which will be the first page you see when you open your booklet, it says write the make and model of your calculator. So fill in what type of calculator you're using in the exam. So hopefully this lesson has given you some good final advice for junior cycle maths. Remember, there's more information on the TheMathsTutor.ie website. So there's videos, there's notes there to help you with your study, and also specifically on the TheMathsTutor.ie/booklet, that will give you the exam technique booklet, which will give you lots of advice before your exams. So the best of luck to you in June.